Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be embarking on a new journey, a journey through all the different ways that you can elect your representatives. We're going to be looking at ways such as a runoff election, first past the post, proportional representation, party list voting, and more. But today we are going to be starting with first past the post. First past the post is used around the world. It is used in most states in the United States. It is used in much of the United Kingdom. It is used in Australia, Canada, and many more countries. So, let's start by looking at the graph. This graph is going to be the centerpiece of our series. I will be using the same graph with the same hypothetical election results to explain each different way to vote. So, let's analyze what are the parties. Well, in this hypothetical election, which I've tried to keep relatively reasonable, you have 8 parties from the far left with the Democratic Socialists, Social Democrats, Greens, Liberals, to the Libertarians, Moderate Conservatives, and, of course, National Conservatives. Some of these words might sound a little foreign to American or Europeans, depending on where you are. Generally, one of the key things people like to talk about is the difference between a Democratic Socialist and a Social Democrat. Essentially, the biggest difference here is Democratic Socialists want socialism as thought to be usually socialism, whereas Social Democrats are more, either depending on which way you look at it, a reformist wing of capitalism that seeks to essentially draw back the negatives of capitalism and keep the very rich in check, but not going for a full everyone's equal socialism. Whereas Democratic Socialists are much more radical in their views. The Greens, as many people know, they're a left-wing environmentalist group. Liberals are probably the most contentious thing between my European viewers and my American viewers. Basically, in this scenario, we are going to be using liberals as a combination. While in the United States, liberals are generally thought to be anyone on the left of the American political spectrum, in Europe they are much more centrist. So we're going to leave them as a center-left for this journey. Libertarians are what many parties around the world are, such as the Free Democratic Party in Germany. They want a very small government. The moderate conservatives and the conservatives can best be represented by Charlie Baker and other just moderates around the world in general, with conservatives represented by more people like Angela Merkel or Valérie Pécresse in France. And then, of course, you get to your national conservatives like Le Pen in France or Trump in America. So, now that we've cleared up what the parties stand for, let's talk about this election. In this hypothetical election, we are going to be looking at a single district in somewhere. You can imagine in the United States of America, for example. In this district, as seen here, the Liberals won the most votes, 25%. And thus, in a first-past-the-post system, the Liberals would win the election. However, it's not exactly the best scenario. Looking at some of the pros of the election, you can see the most popular candidate, the Liberal candidate, did win the election. And some people might argue, yes, the Liberal candidate won. And even better, they're towards the center of the spectrum in this case. However, first past the post creates a lot of problems as well. This is because, obviously, number one, only 25% of people voted for the winning candidate. And this candidate is now going to represent 100% of the voters in that seat. So that's already an issue. Additionally, looking at the graph, if the National Conservatives had just won a few more votes than the Liberals, the National Conservatives, despite being the furthest right of the political spectrum in this district, are still going to be able to win. And they would represent the 100% of voters. So, essentially, first past the post brings up a lot of very good things, where the most popular candidate will win. The number one favorite candidate. The candidate most voters want as their first choice. However, it does have some drawbacks, such as the possibility that a candidate who is nowhere near the middle of that district's political spectrum will win. Additionally, first past the post encourages tactical voting. For example, maybe National Conservative voters see that their candidate will not win the election. But they see that if you take those 20% of voters and add them to the Conservatives, you would have 35% Conservative voters. And this Conservative candidate is probably way more appealing to the National Conservative voters than the Liberal one. And you could look at it from the other side as well. Maybe if the Conservative and National Conservative voters decide to all vote for the Conservative candidate, now the Social Democrats, the Greens, the Democratic Socialists, they would all have to join. Thus, first past the post also encourages a two-party system. This is because you have to win essentially around 50% of the vote in order to be guaranteed success, because there are so many other different voter blocks that could all combine to vote against your candidate. Thus, you have large primaries in nations such as the United States, where Joe Biden, a liberal on this political spectrum, was the nominee for the Democratic Party, which represented the liberal all the way to the Democratic Socialist wing led by Bernie Sanders. And thus, there it is, the pros of first past the post and the cons. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time where we will be talking about runoff elections. Thank you, and don't forget to like and subscribe.